Welcome to the Balancing Busy podcast. Today we're taking a shift and we're actually going to talk more about helping our kids balance the busy, which I'm going to tell you is going to come back to a lot about us balancing the busy. I am interviewing Dr. Ann Svendsen. She is a pediatrician of 25 years and a life coach. So we're getting to learn from someone who has 2+ decades of experience watching kids as they grow and helping that journey and that process as a pediatrician, but also being a life coach. And I knew immediately that I wanted to talk to her and ask her about balancing the busyness for our kids, about anxiety, depression, how we can help and support them, and what she has seen as the biggest things that are hindering kids today. And no surprise, we're going to talk about overscheduling. We're going to talk about not giving them the opportunity to do things for themselves. And I share my thoughts on where we do this, why we do this, where it comes from. This is such a good episode to just help us think about and be more intentional as our roles as parents. So let's jump in. I am so excited for you to hear it. This is Dr. Ann Svendsen. Ann, welcome to the Balancing Busy podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so I already gave you an intro, but this is just such an amazing treat for us to get to be listening to a pediatrician and a life coach at the same time. And so I'm just so excited to pick your brain. I feel like there's so much you can offer to help us as moms, and I'm sure that that's going to get sprinkled in there. But what I really want to focus on is how you can help us help our kids. So let's just start this conversation by talking about the busyness that our kids are facing and dealing with, and what I believe we have seen an uprise in anxiety, in depression, in panic attacks. So tell me your experience first as a pediatrician and years. I mean, how long have you been a pediatrician? You're
Over
like
25 years.
That's what I thought. Okay, I remember that. So I mean, we're talking about 25 years of experience working with kids. What are you seeing? What are the trends?
So I think that we are certainly seeing an increase in anxiety and depression and panic disorder and things like that. And I think that there's so many different facets to this. I think that especially with children being overscheduled, a lot of the overscheduling is done by us when they're little kids and maybe by themselves when they're bigger kids. Certainly COVID threw a wrench into everything when we had to homeschool our kids, which may or may not have been lovely, not. And I think that it's just, I'm seeing over the past couple of decades, just an increase in both kids and parents just trying to meet up to these expectations that either society or parents or themselves have put on themselves. And like, I miss seeing kids just play, unscheduled playtime. We talk about self-care for adults all the time, but we don't talk about it with kids. So I think that there's a lot of overscheduling, too much screen time, not enough family time. And so definitely have seen increases in all of those things, both in children and in parents.
Oh my gosh, there is so much in here that I want to unpack. So much. Okay, so first of all, this idea of self-care for our kids, that just instantly got all these thoughts going for me. One of the things that I've said to my kids as they were growing up, whenever they said, "Oh, we're bored," I would always tease back to them, you can't be bored unless you're boring.
Right.
And they hated it. They would get so frustrated with me. But what I was trying to say was, it's okay to be bored. Sit in it for a minute, and then you're going to get uncomfortable enough that you get some creativity and you come up with something to do. And so I wanted them to have time to be bored and not feel it all. And yet simultaneously, there is this guilt of that we're supposed to entertain them, that we're supposed to keep them busy. Even the idea around that my generation was taught that like, I'm a bad mom if I just let my kids go out and play, especially in the front yard. Like that would not be safe. That is dangerous. That I needed to always, schedule and plan their play dates, and I orchestrated all these things. But then I'm seeing all these teenagers who are crippled at the idea of making a phone call,
Right.
having to ask for something. It's so uncomfortable because we did it all for them.
Exactly.
So speak to that for me.
Well, I think that when it comes to, little kids, and I was a working mother, working full time with 4 kids, a couple of years apart. And so that was difficult. So I didn't really overschedule my kids because there was no time for me to overschedule them. But I do
Yeah.
think that that play dates and things like that are important, both in terms of kids being around other kids and moms being around other moms. But not every single hour of every day needs to be scheduled. And I can remember when I was young saying, I'm bored. And my mom's like, bored? Go clean your room. And so I think that really letting our kids be bored, be creative, unplugging them, being imaginative. And I can remember one of the best Christmas gifts my kids ever got. It wasn't even a gift. We had a big appliance, and we had the huge cardboard box that my husband and I like set up and with markers and stuff like that. They had all these gifts, and they made it into a spaceship, and we were laughing going, all that drama over Christmas in a cardboard box was their favorite gift. And so again,
Yes.
I think that you've got to let kids figure things out on their own. And it's also, I think, important for kids to learn to fail a little bit. So if they've worked on a project, I was not a big one to do the project for them. I let them make mistakes. I tried not to be over their shoulder and talk about their sloppy handwriting, because I think that's the only way they're going to learn how to become more responsible as they grow older. And if my kids forgot a backpack or their lunch, I'm like, well, you'll be a little hungry for a couple of hours. I can't come up and bring you your lunch or bring you your backpack. So when we talk about really trying to get nighttime and morning routine set up, my kids kind of knew what was their responsibility from a fairly early age. And that's how it was. And as a matter of fact, I only have 1 kid left at home, but I still have on my door leading to the garage backpack, lunchbox, band instruments, all those kind of things for one final reminder. But you get to the point where they've got to learn how to do laundry. They've got to learn how to cook. They've got to learn how to, well, this is kind of old school, but I had to tell my adult daughter, how to write a check, because everything's
Yes.
automatic for them right now.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I think that really letting them just fall a little bit. The only way that we learn to walk is to fall, stumble, get back up, try it again, another few steps. And I think that trying to micromanage everything for them is not a healthy thing for children.
Okay, so I feel like we know that when you say it. Like I'm like, she is right. I know this. And I had an interesting experience just last week where I was flying out to go meet my husband for a little fun birthday weekend with him. And there were 2 things that didn't get done before I had to leave. One was picking up my daughter's prescription, and then there was another one for one of the other kids. And so my instant reaction was I felt bad, maybe guilt, right? Like, oh, I should have made sure that got done, but it didn't, the hours didn't align. And so I told her, okay, you're going to have to go get your prescription. And I walked her through what she was going to need to do and said, you've got to go pick this up. And she did that. And she called me when she was done, and she was beaming. She was so proud of herself. And so she's like, I just felt like such an adult. I felt so accomplished. And she did call me right before because she was scared. She's like, she was at a grocery store, right? So she went to the back and took care of it there. And she's like, can I just walk out now? Do I have to pay at the checkout too? And I'm like, no, you're done. And she's like, okay, I just didn't want to get like I was shoplifting. And so it was so funny. So, I had to talk her through that part. And then, she calls me and she's like, oh, I feel so empowered right now. And I just thought about this. And there's been, I could name so many experiences where I almost robbed them of that by doing it for them. But in them doing the thing, they built their confidence. They became more self-reliant and more capable and felt more empowered. So what do you say to all of these parents who do feel like, but I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do their laundry and make the dinner and, just all the things. What do you say to them?
I think that let go of some of that guilt. They've got to learn if they can manage an iPhone, they can certainly manage a hot, cold, warm thing on the washing machine. And sometimes if my kids didn't have stuff and we're digging it out of the hamper, Mom, will you wash this? I said, no, it's time to go put some Febreze on it. So I do a lot of humor with my children, but I really think that beginning with little responsibilities around the house and chores. And when I would explain to kids, my own children, what's involved in me making a doctor's appointment, this is what you're going to need. You're going to need your insurance card. You may need a money to pay, that kind of thing. And I think that the more you are willing to kind of guide them through this and not be judgmental when they make a mistake, that's what they're going to listen to. And so it's nice with adult children to have them say to me, Mom, thanks for not saying I told you so, but you were right. And my kids know, have I been guilty about doing a lot for them? Yes, because I wanted it done quickly and right away, because that's how my life was. It was easier for me just to do it myself than to go through the arguments and that's not fair and why didn't you make the other child do it? And so I think that's kind of a common thing for us busy moms. We just want to get it done. But I do, we used to do Sunday night making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which freeze for a week or longer. And we would just make a bunch of stuff, throw it in the freezer. And at the end of the day, so many things that we think are so important to our children, in the end, that's not what they're remembering. They're remembering a happy mom, not a mom who was always, get this, come on, get your shoes on, get to the car, do this, you didn't do this, that. And so I think that that's the important thing that we can pass on to our children. Take a little responsibility, make a little bit of laughter at our own mistakes, but just, I think it's important for them to know what's really important and what are little nitpicky things. And I think for me, the COVID pandemic really prioritized a lot of things, because two of my college children came home and were living in our house again with two younger children. My husband's a professor. He was teaching from home and I was still going to work. And so my children put in a garden and learned how to pickle. These are my college kids, pickle jalapenos, pickle peppers, those things that we would have never done together as a family had COVID not hit. And it also made me realize, since everything shut down, how many things with COVID shutting things down, how many things in my own life really were not that important that I thought needed to be. 27 birthday parties to go to when kids are little. Well, there were no birthday parties and we did Zoom parties. And so I think there was a little silver lining to that for me.
Yeah, I agree. These things that we believed were obligations, that we were living under the context of, well, I have to. All of a sudden, we didn't have to. And we realized maybe I never had to. I agree. I felt like we really learned a lot of those same lessons. So in helping our kids, and what I'm hearing really is it's going to start with us. Every time it's going to start with us. If we're going to help our kids be able to balance their busyness, we need to balance ours. We can't be so overscheduled that we take over every time, because it is faster and easier and it's just the go-to, that we need to let them fail. Now, can you speak to letting our kids fail and kind of, is there a place to recognize where we do step in and where we don't? Because especially as they start to get older, it's easy to believe, oh, all these things are high stakes. I've really got to help with this. This is going to matter. But does it rob them of much, much more by stepping in all the time?
No, I think just constant reminders and conversations about what's important in terms of career and family and, spiritual life. And, I didn't want my kids to fail in school, like fail every grade and not ever get into college. But I think that we really stayed on top of knowing what their grades are. Most of the time, they knew what they needed to do to get stuff done. And so I think it was just kind of a gentle nagging that we did with our kids. But again, I remember working on some projects with my school kids, and it's like, don't, parents, do not do this project. And I would walk in and there are PowerPoint presentations and all this other stuff. And then, my kids misspelled words on poster board. And so we really just kind of let them figure that out on their own. And the more pride they take in getting a good grade for something that they did on their own, it just fuels everything.
Yeah. So something I was just listening to actually another podcast. It was talking about generations and how what generations go through will then experience history as they come up and become the leaders. And my generation can sort of feel like, or the ones behind me, those, we were all raised by baby boomers, and we were left to ourselves. Go out and play. If I was caught in the house looking like I wasn't doing anything, I was either given a chore or sent outside. Don't come back. And so we have overcompensated to where we don't leave our kids alone enough. We're not giving them enough space. And one of the things I've really been thinking about a lot lately is that some of my greatest, what I would consider strengths or attributes, actually came from being left to my own devices, right? I was left alone, and I more than probably normal. But when I think about something that I'm grateful for is my problem solving skills, my ingenuity. But that came from no one was figuring anything out for me.
That's right.
No one was helping me, so I better figure out how to solve this on my own.
Right.
Or I think about, stepping into a situation and making friends. I actually had this conversation with teenagers this morning, and I was talking with them about they're feeling lonely. There's all of these teenagers and kids who feel so lonely. But guess what? All of you feel lonely. So who's going to be the brave one that's willing to stand up, get outside of their comfort zone, and bring everybody together? Because we think we're alone on an island, but really there's all these people on this island feeling lonely also, but everybody's waiting for someone else to do something about it. Right. So who's going to be that brave soul who does something? And I think about that. So I switched schools right at junior high, and I got lost in the shuffle because it was several schools melding in together. Everyone just assumed I came from the other school, but I had actually moved completely from a private school into public, so I didn't know anyone. Mm-hmm. And at first, I didn't know what to do about it. It felt so uncomfortable to sit and eat lunch alone at a table where everyone could see that you were alone. So I would take my lunch into the bathroom, and I ate lunch in the bathroom for, quite a while, like many, many others have done. And kids today are doing. One of the kids I was talking to, he said, I'm noticing that in high school, they're going to their cars. They eat lunch in their car alone because they don't want to be seen at that table alone. And I had this moment where I just said, I'm done. I am done. I want friends. And so I built this entire plan, multi-step plan to make friends. And we had this student store, and I looked at all the different candies. I was very methodical about which candy I was going to use because I wanted it to be individually wrapped. I was really afraid that if it was, unwrapped and it was in my palm of my hand, people would be like, ew, gross, and so I knew it couldn't be Skittles or M&Ms. It needed to be wrapped. And then I wanted to have as many opportunities as possible. So I settled on Mambas. Every day I would take the change out of my dad's change bowl, enough to buy a pack of Mambas. I would, right after school, run to the student store, buy the Mambas, and then I I would stand around the groups of kids talking, these circles that felt very impenetrable. And I would open up the Mambas, and then I would start to be like, oh, here, I have too many. Do you want some? And I would do this day after day after day. And I actually ended up getting known as Mamba Girl, which wasn't quite what I was going for. But eventually, and it took time, it took work, it was uncomfortable, it was awkward. But eventually it did work, and I built these friendships, and it made all the difference. But again, I was willing to do these scary things because no one was going to step in and help me.
Right.
So this idea of us being willing to step back and let our kids fail, or let them be uncomfortable, or maybe give them the ideas, the tools, work with them. I mean, I've definitely practiced with my kids, like, okay, pretend I'm the person, right? And we've role played it out. What have you seen in your profession with your own kids? Like, how can we help our kids who are lonely?
I think that for one, we need to be, and this is a little bit of a side note, but we need to be really careful about how we talk to our adult friends in front of our children.
Yes.
I often will hear in my office either parents or parents and friends or whatever, just talking, nagging, griping in front of their kids to me about other stuff. And you really just don't want your kids to hear that all the time. And so that's just a little side note. But
Can you give an example? Like, what would be examples of like what you really don't want to be passing down and having them hear?
Maybe saying something like, well, my order was wrong at McDonald's. So when I went up there and I told them they better get this straight, and that kind of thing. And it's like, so our children are learning by misbehaving, you get what you want. And
Okay.
so a lot of times
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at what goes on in my office. And I'm going, if they're not even being a little more respectful in front of a pediatrician, what are things like behind closed doors?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I have, children in my practice with behavioral problems or issues, a lot of times it's just really like, what's going on at home? Where is this coming from? And so I think that with the alone part, hopefully, and my kids were all big talkers. And so I think maybe even extroverted children can feel alone at some point in different circles. And especially junior high years to me are so difficult because they're not little kids, they're not high schools, and really they just want to fit in. I think that would be a place where I talk a little bit about getting out of your comfort zone is uncomfortable. And that's the only way we're going to proceed or perceive growth and getting out there and making friends. And so sometimes it's even, I can remember when my kids were junior high-ish, I'd say, well, why don't we just invite some people over and you guys can watch TV and braid your hair or do whatever it is. But I think just being honest with our kids about the importance of just being kind and open, and just even saying, hey, and I was always so proud when my children would say, hey, there was a new kid in school and we went and sat lunch and ate lunch with them so they didn't have to be alone. And that just makes my mother heart go, oh, And so I think just everyday conversations about being a kind human being, and that you never know what other children's circumstances are. You don't know what their home life is. And a lot of times my house was the house to have everybody over, and people would spend the night and I would cook for everybody. And I think that just kind of eavesdropping a little bit on my children as they were growing up, just really being thankful for the home life that I have. And so many in my practice don't have a regular home life. And that just is heartbreaking to me, because I feel like it all trickles down to the children.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely don't want to have a pediatrician and a life coach with me today and not ask you about how we can help our kids who are dealing with anxiety. How can we help them through this process? When is the time that we should seek additional help? What are the signs that we should be looking for? and how can we help them best at home?
Well, we see anxiety in children as young as toddlers. And sometimes it's new sleeping problems or crying every day at daycare or acting out and hitting other kids or biting other kids beyond the normal 2 year olds, let's bite each other kind of thing. And so it may be sleep problems, like all of a sudden they were good sleepers and now have to sleep in mom and dad's bed every night. Um, so I think that the toddlers can be difficult because it's hard to know what's normal 3 year old throwing temper tantrum behavior. If I've got a 6 year old throwing temper tantrums, there's something going on. And so I
Okay.
look at what is kind of age appropriate and what is not. Um, I think that a lot of behavioral problems, kids are not getting enough sleep and not going to bed, and there's a TV in the room. And so I'm just like, bedtime, no TV in the room, no social media, none of that. And it's just getting healthy habits because I think a lot of uh, through across all of the ages, these children are not getting enough sleep. And I think that you take the phone away at night. You take it away, and
Yeah.
I see children getting phones way too early. And my kids were among the later in the group to get phones. But I think that um, making sure they're getting enough sleep. And also, when your kids come to talk to you, put your phone down. If you're going to watch them at a game, put your phone down. And so I went to one of my son's basketball games a couple of years ago, and every parent was on their phone. And I was up there yelling, go, go, go. And it's like, that's not being engaged with your kids. So I think anxiety can present as behavioral problems,
Hmm.
wetting the bed, difficulty sleeping, and behavioral problems both at home and school, or either or. Depression, same thing. It may not be, um, oh, I am sad. It could be grades failing, going in the room, locking the door, staying glued to the phone, um, chronic complaints of pain. Oh, I've got headaches. I have tummy aches. I can't go to school. So chronic pain to us, once we've ruled out the pathological things that can cause it, when we do this whole big workup and everything's negative, that's when we start to delve into what's really going on. And also, I think that it's just nobody tells us as parents how we should talk to our kids. We don't get taught that. We just kind of model after who we think are good parents. And I think it's important for children to know that they can tell their parents anything, even though we don't like it.
Mm.
Like I've heard some stuff from my children that I'm like, la 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 la. But the fact that they know that they can still come to me with something, um, really, uh, that's the biggest thing. It's really communication and making sure that
Yes.
you are having an unplugged Sunday, or like you said, game night. And sometimes when we play board games, I would just bring up a hypothetical situation. Like, what would happen if somebody came by and said, your mom can't pick you up, so I'm going to come get you? That kind of thing, the whole stranger danger thing.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that um, really that there's so much separateness in the family because of everybody's busy lives and careers and sports and everything else. There's not enough time at home. Kids spend not enough time just with their families. And my kids did sports and stuff like that too, but also they couldn't do everything they wanted to do. And I really
Yeah.
wanted them to finish out the season and not quit.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So I'm really hearing this need to be intentional about creating quality time, because here's the truth. If we're not intentional about creating that quality time, it will all just get filled,
It will.
right? It's the space will be filled. The time will go somewhere.
Right.
I was talking about even within the holidays, how this need to schedule the family fun, the family moments first, because they will all the days will get filled up and all of a sudden it's all gone. And that's true in our whole life. We have to actually schedule those intentional moments where we can all just be. And in our family, those have been not always, but pretty consistently, Monday nights are always family night, family dinners. And obviously there's nights where people have things and it doesn't work. But for the most part, family dinners, Sunday being a day for family, those have been where we keep coming back to center and looking at the home as center. That needs to be the refuge and the peaceful place. And when home isn't that place, because school's hectic and it's crazy and it's hard and it's stressful and it's always new things, there has to be the safe place that everyone can come back to, especially our kiddos. It's just so critical and so important, but it means we really have to think about how we're going to do that, because it's easy to get distracted and sidetracked. And what you said about being available for our kids, putting our phones down, something that I've really learned is we have to be available when they're ready. And that is hard. Right. That is really hard. I have learned that teenagers are ready to talk around 9 p.m. at night. Mm-hmm. And that is when I want to check out. Right. I joked all of my kids growing up that I've never been a good night mom. I just wasn't. And I used to feel so guilty about it. Mm-hmm. And then I finally realized, like, I am incredible morning mom. Right. Okay. I will sit there. I will chat with you. I will make the breakfast and make sure everything's ready and just engage. But come 7:30 p.m. and I am like checking out. And so when they were little, my husband, he was the good nighttime parent and I was the good morning parent. Right. But now I have had to change that, because my teenagers, when they want to start telling me all their problems, everything they're thinking about and experiencing, it is like 9:30 at night. Right. And I have to okay, Leah, rally, because this is when they need you. Right. So that's been a really, really interesting thing to recognize, is we need to be available when they're ready. Right. And that is not always on our schedule. Right,
right. One thing that we always did is we involved our kids in cooking. And we had a lot of interesting conversations around our island while we're chopping vegetables, Yes. I just keep chopping, okay, just keep chopping, But I think that, the now that I have 3 adult children and one who's 16, just looking back and talking to my kids about the things that I really stressed out about being a mother, and everybody had all these great birthday parties, and I'm trying to find if the bowling place is open because I forgot about planning this kind of thing. And, my son, who's 22, said, "Mom, it was never about the parties. It was never about the parties." He said, "You always just did stuff, and I knew you were there and making things." But he said, I was with friends and family, and I don't know why you got so stressed about it. And I guess it's just, because it's the whole comparing to what other yes. kids are doing, what other mothers are having done. And I always laugh going, my kids never cared that it was store-bought cookies.
Yeah. You and I have talked about that a lot before.
Never had Pinterest perfect cookies. It's like, oh, Kroger, these are half price from yesterday, half price. And it's not about the cookies,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about, and a lot of those, if we're being really, really honest, at least for me, if I'm being 100% honest, I am not doing this nearly as much for my kids as I am for myself and the way I want the other parents to see me. Right? I want them to think, wow, look at her. Mm-hmm. She sure has it all together and is doing great. But maybe what we really need is to give each other permission to just be real. My sister has this hilarious thing that she says when people come over and her house is a mess, and she said, "Oh, I just wanted to give you permission to be real today." Right. And I love that. Right. I love that. Instead of this idea that we need to have it all together so that no one judges us, what if we're willing to be a little bit more real so that we can give permission to that other mama who is struggling and say, "Hey, you know what? The store-bought cookies are just fine. Right. Doing it the simple way is just fine. Making things a little easier, a little less about the things and a little more about the people." Right. Is that better way to go?
Right. Right. I agree.
Oh, so good. Okay. So, okay, Betty Ann, what would you share with us? What are the best things that we can do right away, right now, to help our kids, our teenagers, our young adults balance the busy?
I think that one thing that I would recommend really is trying to keep track of how much time they're spending on social media. Because a lot of the times when my kids personally, oh, I don't have time, I don't have time. Well, you've been on that phone for 30 minutes on doing that. So I really would, and as adults, we're also on our phones too much. So I really would work
Yes.
on controlling the amount of time spent on social media. And that will help with some of the busy parts. And don't feel compelled to sign your children up for 27 different things when they're 4 years old, dance and tag football and all this kind of stuff, because really it's fun. Oh, they like it, they enjoy it, but more things on their plate is more things on your plate, especially if you have more than a couple of kids. And one kid is enough. I mean, really busy. When my children were little, I limited the birthday parties we could go to on the weekends, because they would get 3 invitations for different people and this and that. And so to me, it was almost impossible. We always either got a gift and or wrote a card and made a special note, but it was impossible sometimes to juggle these children and their activities. And my husband and I were like back and forth, and then, wonder why we were exhausted at the end of the week. So we really kind of limited some of the things that we did with our children. And I think that if there's a change in their behavior, there's a reason. And so if they're normally a nice, happy kid and now they're snapping out more than usual as expected for a teenager, or slamming doors, staying silent, acting guilty about something, really pay attention to these things and try not to say not now. I don't have the time. When your child has questions or concerns, at least even if you're driving the car and they're bringing up something, just say, let's pull over and have this talk. Because I think unless we follow up on it, some of these conversations are never going to happen, because more often than not, the child is not going to follow up with you on the conversation if you don't follow it up. And we used to have regular family meetings, and we would sit down. How are things going? Anybody have something coming up stressful this week? And if the kids started arguing over something, or I think just kind of being a stable, united front for single parents, just stable, stable person in the room, because there's so much extra stimulus going on for them outside of our little bubble. We can't keep them in a bubble for forever, but I think letting them know, as you mentioned, that bubble is always safe and it's a place to come home to, because no matter where they are in their lives and ages and stages, you want the family to be the home. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. Some things that I found with, being able to make space for those conversations. 2 things that have helped me is, number 1, making time for kids individually. If you have multiple,
right,
saying, hey, run with me to the grocery store, run with me to go run this errand, grab one of them and pull them with you, so that you have some time to have those one-on-one conversations, so they can talk to you about maybe what they're having a hard time with. Another thing was allowing silence in the car.
Sure.
I very, very frequently did not have music on, because then we're all listening and they couldn't be looking at their phones and have headphones in or anything like that. Like, we were talking together. And my favorite thing is listening to books. And so I always wanted us listening to books as a family, which I've really enjoyed. But I had to stop myself sometimes and be like, no, we are not going to listen to the book. We're going to talk to each other, because otherwise, I took that opportunity. And yes, it was something I like to often ask myself, is this good, better, or best? And I would say good is, everybody's listening to music together. Better, in my opinion, was, us listening to a book and learning something together. But best was often me not doing either of those and allowing us to just really talk and have a conversation. So we have to be, I feel like intentional is the word of this episode, because we have to be intentional about creating those times to have those conversations. So when we see there's something is different, this isn't their normal behavior, what do we do?
You call your doctor. call your pediatrician or your family medicine doctor and ask for an extended appointment, because it's not going to be a 15-minute conversation. And, a lot of times I will talk to kids separately from parents, no matter the age, and then we'll bring them back together and have a plan. And a lot of times I feel like there's relief that I'm the mediator bringing these things up, because parents may go, "Oh, you never told us." Well, it's hard to talk to your parents, but at least if you've got somebody that you can talk to that can be the mediator and facilitate the conversation, things go much better that way than when there's total silence in the room. Like I like to make sure there's follow up for them, so when we leave the room, everybody can feel okay about it. But it's definitely a conversation that you need to have with, a pediatrician, a pastor, uh, another provider. But especially if you think there's really a mood issue going on with anxiety or depression, for sure.
Okay. So good. Thank you so much for being here today, for chatting with us. I am so grateful to you and have just had so much fun working with you the last couple of years. So,
thank you so much. Same here, Leah. Take care.
I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. As I'm just thinking back about the conversation that I just had with Dr. Betty Ann Svendsen, some of the things that are really sticking out to me is recommitting myself to being available when my kids are available, to recognizing and looking for the signs for when things are a little bit different, and really making that opportunity to just, hey, we can talk about anything. And I feel like that is something we've worked really hard to do throughout our kids' entire lives. And I think the earlier we can start, the better, but it's never too late to start. But that I want to reaffirm over and over. We're here. We understand you're not going to be perfect. Let's keep having these conversations and just evaluating what's happening in our family right now and believing and recognizing that I can change things. I can see what's working and what's not working, and I can do new things. Something that Betty Ann shared with me, not recording, was how her daughter who's getting married, she and her fiance were each talking about all their different experiences growing up, and that what they as parents modeled matters. And that she didn't really think about that when they were little because she was just so busy. We're so busy. I didn't think about that enough when my kids were little, but I'm recognizing it now, and she's recognizing it. And so just being aware of what we're modeling, how we talk about people, how we talk about circumstances, how we talk about our kids in front of our kids and to others, the kind of humans that we want our kids to be. I think they're gonna pick one of two paths. They're either gonna try to be the opposite of us, or they're going to model our behavior. And we're not perfect. None of us are perfect, but we can always strive to be just a little bit better. And that can start now, whether we are parents of toddlers or we're grandparents. We can start right now by changing the things that maybe we're like, I don't know if that was so good. So this episode, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will share it with fellow parents on the path who are trying to balance the busyness for ourselves and for our kids. I will have details for Betty Ann and how you can reach her, especially if you're interested in life coaching. And she specializes in helping the insanely busy overachievers, the professionals. And so I'll have all of her information in our show notes. You can find those at balancingbusy.com, at leahremellet.com/blog. Thank you so much. If you love this episode, please take a moment right this very second and scroll to where the reviews are. Leave a 5-star review and a couple sentences about why you enjoy the Balancing Busy podcast and how you think that it could help others. That helps me so much, and it helps your fellow busy humans out there so that they too can balance the busy just a little bit better. Thank you. Have an amazing day. And remember, you are capable. This is possible. And it all starts with those little needle movers. If we can just make those differences 1% at a time, we truly can live a life that lights us up, and we can do the same thing for our kids. I'll see you in the next episode.